and we are recording. Rachel, what are we going to talk about today?
How did we become collectors?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best Good Friends podcast. I am with the Jets, she is with the Sharks, and we're here to talk about how we become collectors of all
That was a
sorts.
good one.
We, I thought you'd like that. Went musical on us.
Yes.
So we collect all facets of stuff, whether it be, artwork, music related, sports memorabilia, all kinds of directions. So this could go in 1,000 different ways, but I want to start with asking the question, do you have any specific rituals that you follow when you get an item? So say whether it be a record or a card or something like that, where you're like, before I do anything, I'm going to start with this.
Well, lately, for records, we had this discussion previously. I currently don't have any inner or outer sleeves that are not being used. So I've been just putting them in my record slots, which is like totally against everything I usually do because usually I rip it right off. But now I'm kind of going towards Bobby's lane where I'm just using what I'm given. Shamefully.
Well, it's cool to change sleeves, do all
It's,
that. A lot of
I
people
know.
will totally clean
But
records and
even
re-sleeve.
I noticed today for like the music on vinyl releases, the ones they provide aren't bad
Yeah.
because actually they're the paper, but like on the inside they have this clear. I don't know if you've gotten music on vinyl, haven't you?
Yes.
They have that like clear plastic on the middle part,
Hmm.
so it's not totally just like the cardboard insert and then nothing. So where it's scratching, they actually
Yeah.
have that clear plastic, which I like. So I'm gonna actually use their inners. But yeah, right now I'm just putting them in my record shelves. Cards usually just they go into a penny sleeve, which is like a soft protector, and then a hard protector.
I watched a guy on a video the other day pop one of those hard shell card collectors.
Oh,
Sorry, hard shell
a slab
protectors.
case.
I guess that's what it's called. You'd be the one to tell me. But yeah, when he was cracking that thing open, it was making me nervous. Watch it.
People
It's
do
like,
that, and they, you know why they do that?
I'm not sure.
To see if they can get a better grade on a card. So, like, say they get a PSA 5, and they think it could be better, or I should say, like from another grading company. So, like an SGC 5, they'll crack it and resubmit it to like PSA, which is another grading company, to get a better grade, which means more value. So people
So
do it all the time.
the idea that you would have it graded,
Yeah,
you would say, okay, I'm going to have it regraded, which means basically by cracking that case,
it's
you're
got to be a good
risking
card,
damaging the card
unless you're a
in order to,
professional,
yeah,
a
in order to
trained
get another.
professional. Which still,
Yeah.
I would not. I've never done it, and I don't think I could.
Okay, so that gets me to another aspect that I'm sure we'll dive further into later,
Hmm.
but since it's already been brought up, when we're talking about collecting, a lot of the things that I tend to, we'll just say, gather around me, it's,
Ford.
yeah, hoard is another word that my wife would happily use. A lot of these things aren't necessarily meant to be of value for resale purposes. So
Right.
there is the type of collector that would be, in my case, a hoarder. It's like, okay, I want to have
Mm.
like a larger library of things because I like to revisit things. I like to listen to records over and over, for example. Or I like posters. I'm a huge poster collector. That's one of the first things that I got into that I remember really thinking, I probably have too many of those. As far as
Right.
they won't fit on my wall anymore, I'm going to have to take something down and put something up, but I'm not throwing it away. I'm going to save it. So we'll revisit that in a minute. But there's the collector that's hoarding in the sense of this will become valuable and then I'll later sell this. And then there's the collector that is hoarding it because they have personal and emotional connection to it and they want to keep it regardless of value.
See, I don't know where this follows under, but in my one hobby that I collect Ohio State football memorabilia, I actually know of collectors who will buy things, store them in tubs, put them in the closet, and never touch them or bring them out ever. They stay in the closet.
Okay.
I can't
So
stand that.
so where is the emotional or where is the
I don't know.
monetary value in treating
I know a
something that way?
handful of people that do that though.
Yeah. The
Hmm.
only things of mine that get stored away are like the posters, for example. Once I took posters off my wall, I mean, you can't really display them in a way that keeps in rotation for your
I
daily
think that's
life, so you
different.
have to
Yeah.
store them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also there because I plan on using them somewhere else, maybe in the basement or something like that one day.
Yeah, you never
Who
know.
knows? But like I said, that was the first thing where I was like, okay, I'm going to take these off of the wall because I've acquired more and I want to hang them
Hmm.
up. But I also was very particular about not caring if I had punches in the corners or tape on the corners or any of that stuff. I know that that devalues the item itself, but again, I was
Yeah,
never acquiring these with intention of taking them down and
this is
selling them
funny.
later.
Yeah, this is funny because when I was younger, that's all I used was thumbtacks and sticky tack.
Yeah,
To pin up my Backstreet Boys posters from Teen Bop or like
yeah,
movie posters. We had
yeah,
thumbtacks in them, sticky tack. Now I have all of them framed.
yeah. Well, see, I would be different about that now, probably just because something over time changes to where
It's
you're like,
just
well, you
funny
know
to think
what?
about
I
it.
have
Hmm.
the corners are torn off from where I tore the tape off of them,
Yeah.
or,
Hmm.
and it really comes down to the idea of when you look at it, you're like, oh man, it's a little beat up, but it's also got some character. So there's two
But people
versions of
loved it.
that. Yeah, I think that like say you're displaying you bought a toy and you don't open it and you're
Hmm.
hanging it on your wall so
Yeah.
it's up for display. I don't see any problem with leaving those in the what are those called, the plastic cases. I know there's a name for them. Goodness gracious. Anyway,
Yeah,
doesn't
I don't
matter.
know.
So if you're hanging those up, it kind of gives you a chance to display them. Whereas if you take them out, like behind you, you have yours on the shelf behind you. That's just as cool. But if you don't have
Yeah.
a shelf and you choose to just put them on your wall, then leaving them in the case kind
Hmm.
of makes sense.
Which is,
But is it done for value or is it done for display purposes? Because I'm sure, depending on who you're talking to, that would fit. Blister
maybe
pack. That's what
are
they're
we just
called, a blister
overthinking
pack.
it though? Are we just overthinking the whole thing?
Well, am I right about that? It's called a blister pack.
No,
Is that?
yeah, 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 you're
Yeah.
good on that.
Okay. So maybe we are overthinking the whole thing. I
Not
don't
like
know.
us personally, but like the people that
Yeah.
are storing stuff in their closets, the people that are like overly anal about things, which I'm not. I love to
Yeah.
display my stuff and see it and mess around with it. Which is also funny because when my niece was over a few months ago, she was in my room
Yeah.
and she picked up one of my Ohio State figurines in a box. And I was like, she's like, yeah, Rachel, why is it still in the box? Why don't you take it out and play with it? And I'm like,
Yeah.
put it down. And now I have it
Ah,
like put away in my storage case.
gotcha.
And I'm like, oh God, please don't open that.
So something erupted at that very moment where you were like, "Oh my gosh, this has not just an emotional value, but there's a monetary value that you're attaching to the packaging as well."
Yeah,
So,
and like the thing is, like if it was taken out of the blister pack, it would just totally ruin because I have the paper part of it is signed.
okay.
It's already fragile, so it was also that part too. I'm like, oh, please don't break it or make it fall out because I have it signed. But it was
Yeah.
funny just to think of it from her perspective.
Yeah.
Why is
Well,
this in the box? You're not playing with it.
you just made a great point too for anybody that might just be listening and not watching us. The packaging itself was signed, which makes now the
Yeah.
packaging just as valuable as the product inside
Mm-hmm.
to an extent. Whether that be, like somebody might get their record signed, but for some reason they don't take it out of the shrink wrap. That seems like a
Right.
terrible approach, but I know I've
I
seen
know.
people do it. And then you scribble on the shrink wrap, and now you have a sealed record that you're never
How does
going to
that
listen
look?
to. It looks terrible, in my opinion.
So
I
you
mean,
just
I would
sign
much
it
rather
on
it
the seal?
uh, like just straight over the shrink wrap. I've seen people do it. It's like, yeah,
Man, that
whatever.
makes me
That to
nervous
each their
about like.
own. You know,
No, I get it. I just feel like that would be
yeah,
so much more prone to fading or ripping or just like the slightest stuff.
yeah. That was what I was thinking about it as well because
I don't know.
if it's
Again,
on
no.
the sleeve, you're
Yeah.
able to put it in a poly bag, store it,
Which
protect
I
it, do whatever
have,
you want
yeah.
to do with it, and you can still handle it and listen to the record. Once it's signed on a shrink wrap, I mean, you're to us that's just getting torn and thrown
Which
away.
brings
It's
me back to the
pointless.
point of are we overthinking it in terms of do we need like I keep all my signed posters or records out of the sunlight so it does not get direct sunlight. But people are like, oh, you need this in UV glass. You need this to not be touching the glass. I'm like, do we really need to be doing all of these things?
Yeah. I
You know
would
what I mean?
say I would say it's going too far when your protection of the item uh, overcompensates for your enjoyment of the item.
Like the enjoyment.
Maybe I'm not saying that right, but if you
No,
just
I
can't,
know what you mean.
yeah, I mean, if say this water bottle's something valuable, if I'm afraid to pick it up and go, wow, this is a water bottle, and open it up and have a drink, then really, what is the value of the product inside this?
Hmm.
So, but there are things where you might say, hey, I've bought two of these. I want to keep one in condition because you're thinking about selling it later down the road. That's a different kind of
Yeah,
collector as well. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But it's the idea
trying to
of saying,
think.
I'm not going to enjoy what the product was made for. Like,
Yeah.
even in the blister packs, you can still see the product, whether you lay your
Yep.
hands on it or twist the arms or, play war with it on your tabletop. Whatever you do, that depends on kind of your age bracket. I mean, if you're a little kid, you're going to rip that thing open and you're going to have a blast with it. Or unless you're 40-year-old virgin, which he has them all, stored.
Right. Forgot about
Which
that.
he eventually sells on eBay, by the way. Spoiler alert. I should have said spoiler alert first. So if you're a 40-year-old, never mind. Go back and watch the
So
movie. It's hilarious. But,
I wrote down a question for us.
okay, go ahead.
What is your first memory of collecting?
Okay, so I was obviously into music before I was into the poster collecting, but I do remember posters being the first thing where I realized it's like I may have more than enough, but I'm going to keep going.
Hmm.
So as far as obsessive collecting, I know posters were one of the early things, but it's got to be cassettes were the first things that I really got into because records
Hmm.
I enjoyed, but that was, I could play them in my living room with the family on their stereo.
Yeah.
Eventually I got my own record player. But before that, I mean, cassettes came around and you could get in the BMG catalogs or whatever that might have been. And I just had this treasure chest of cassette tapes where I would just consume
That's
all I
awesome.
could, and they were layer after layer in
Yeah.
that treasure chest. No, so it's like, do you want to hear Black Sabbath Masters Reality? It's in the bottom rack, third row over from this. I knew right where it all was because when you're a kid, that's all you focus on is your
Right.
stuff,
Hmm.
I guess. But I don't remember really freaking out about a whole lot of other collectible items other than cassettes. I do remember that being something that was a big, like I had a lot of them and I was really protective of them because they
Yeah.
also would get gone easily because everybody that was friends of mine or my
Hmm.
brothers or whatever were all music
Snatch them.
fans. Well, everybody wants to borrow that cassette. Hey, can I borrow that? I'll bring it back tomorrow. Next thing you
Which
know, you
brings me
just
to my
don't see
dad
it.
writing on these
Yeah.
record covers.
Yeah, exactly. You
Oh
just
my
don't see
God.
it. And also, side note, which is so funny, somehow I wound up with like 5 copies of Europe's Final Countdown cassette because everybody bought that cassette and then realized they didn't like it, and it wound up at my house.
So you got it. They like traded out a Black Sabbath for that.
Probably. Probably. But yeah, I would say for me, my first memory of really that or VHS tapes. But VHS tapes I didn't go as hard on
Right.
until later on when I could afford more VHS tapes. But yeah, cassettes, that would be the one for me that, because man, I had so many. So what about you? What was the thing that
Yeah, it was
triggered
harder
you
for me to
into
think
the
of
first collectible?
one, but I mean, we're gonna get to other points here in a minute, but I would say sports programs, just because when I was little, that's what my family and I already always did was went to sporting events, wrestling events, and my dad would always buy programs. So I think, and that they're still important to me today. Like I'll always get a program, and keep it from an event. But I think that, I mean, there's others which I'll get to, but really think programs are where I started, just because my dad always bought them. He always made sure my brother and I got like a program or a wrestling program, which I wish I still had the wrestling ones. Oh my
A lot of bands would do that as well. There was Iron Maiden
god.
was
Oh
really
really?
big about having the music like programs when you went to the tours, or
Oh my gosh. That
who
would
are
be
the
so
others?
awesome to have today though.
I feel like Iron Maiden and AC/DC may have been. I'm sure a lot of bands done it. It's probably just the
Was
thing
it
to
just like a
do in general.
booklet or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
what
like
did
a
it have
tour
in it?
booklet. Like
Okay.
for Iron Maiden, it might have pictures of what their stage set was because they always had those real elaborate
You see, I
shows.
didn't have this when I was
Yeah,
younger. That's awesome.
Yeah, it would be stuff like that. Speaking of, if I can find it, I have a small baseball program, and I think it's from '86 or something. I'll mail it to you
Nice.
the next time I send you some records. So I just got to find
Cool.
it. It's
Yeah, I
probably
mean,
hidden in a tub in my attic.
whereas,
But yeah.
and then
Also,
I have, oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, oh, I was gonna say I remember
You're good.
really being into like as far as toys go. I mean, I
Hmm.
loved little horror toys like whether it be a Frankenstein or a little
Yes,
toy
we've talked
bat or
about
something
this.
like that. Yeah, all
Hmm.
the Halloween stuff. But those really
Right.
were seasonal items, so it's not like at the time you could just find them anywhere and everywhere. But I do remember being a GI Joe and a He Man fan. GI Joe was a thing that I do remember having a few of, not a lot. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
we didn't go crazy on them as far as my parents didn't let me go crazy, but that's probably before cassettes because I remember when my grandfather would take me to get a haircut at old Yank's place, which Yank was the guy that had the carousel outside the the red and white
Bobby got
carousel. That
haircuts.
yeah, candy striper or whatever you call those things.
Yep.
But yeah, he'd take me over to Yanks, and that would be the thing. I would get a haircut, and I would be able to get a toy after I got my haircut. And I think we did that twice, maybe that I remember. And then one time I was like, "Are we gonna go get a toy?" And he was like, "Nope, we're going to the
Yeah.
house." And then I had already had my haircut. I'd been hornswoggled. But yeah, my grandfather, that was the thing. He'd take me to old Yanks, and I'd get me a chop top. That was the
Oh
military
man.
cut, just like my pappy. Yep, good
All right. Well, the
times.
next one I have is: are you the only collector in your family
No, probably not. Definitely not.
that
Now
you
that I'm
know
thinking
of?
about it, yeah, because my dad was a big motorcycle guy. Is a big motorcycle guy. There's no was. He is a big motorcycle guy. So many motorcycles over and vehicles, cars, any kind of gearhead stuff. My older brother and my dad would be into.
Okay.
My mom was also the same way. She was into stuff like that. But generally, my dad and my older brother, they were always into engines, muscle cars, motorcycles, and I was always interested in it, but I never was the one that got my hands on it. That's not where my passion fell because I kind of got into the music aspect of things.
Right.
Yeah, that was really it. There's other things that I could go on and on about, but those are the big ones that surrounded our house.
Yeah. I mean, my brother's not. I would say my dad. Yes, he's always collected. Not anymore, but we have sports pennants. You know the pennants
Hmm.
with the team names on them, and he collects shot glasses. He used to collect records,
Yeah,
and I know of like one of my cousins that collects like old gas station pumps and signs, stuff like that.
yeah.
But that's, I mean, I don't know. Maybe some ancestors did. I don't know. That's all I
Yeah.
know of though. So
We had in our basement we had Harley Davidson parts all across the top of the ceiling of the basement. They were just hanging
yeah,
down, so we would trade with people, trade with friends, dad's friends, my brother's friends that come over. They needed help. My dad's a extremely intelligent mechanic. There's a lot of people that would call him and say, "Hey, I'm having some trouble with this," and then next thing you know, my dad would be able to help
he
them
just
either
knows.
work through it or. My dad's just he's got the magic touch. Like my car was broke down for a month. I could not get this thing to start. It was at my friend's house, stuck. My dad literally knocked on the door, woke us up Saturday morning because we worked together, so we just stayed at
Hmm.
his house, my friend's house. My dad came over, knocked on the door, woke us up, got my keys, walked out to the car, and turned the key over, and it started. I mean, I'm not lying when I say that, and it's such a
See,
funny story because it literally sat still for a month. I couldn't get it to start. I'd recharge the battery, start it, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, you were probably flooding it." No, I was not. I promise.
right?
But I don't know. Maybe he was tinkering with it before I woke up. I'm not sure. Maybe he knew something that I didn't about the car. But it's a hilarious story and absolutely true. It sat still just right there until he just came over and woke us up, turned the key, and it started. It's like, okay, which is hilarious to me. But that's the kind of things that my dad would do where other people would literally fight with stuff, and
Right.
then my dad would just be able to look at it and go, "Oh, well, you gotta do this and it'll work." He got a job at a motorcycle shop, and all of the technicians were trying to get this bike running, and he just walked over to him and was like, "Yeah, here you go." Laid his hands on it for about 5 minutes, and then they had the motorcycle going, and they were like, "Okay, we can't let you just be here. You've got to go to school, get your
Yeah.
degree, and come back and be our technician because you weren't allowed to work on the bikes unless you had the
Mm.
degree. So you're literally sending a 50-year-old dude to go get his degree so he can work on your motorcycles. He's like, you're telling me that,
Hey,
yeah, I have
some
more.
people just have that gift.
Yeah, he just was able to do that, and it always amazed me. Very very cool, very cool that he would do that.
It's cool.
But yeah, so they sent him to college or whatever the school was, made sure he got his degree, and brought him back, and he became one of the big mechanics over there for a while, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, he didn't need the degree. They just weren't allowed to work on the bikes without it, so he had to go get it, which cracked me up.
Hey, let's see. What else do I have? What are some different things that you've collected throughout the years?
Oh, well, I remember GI Joes being a little kid thing. Not that I collected them like had hundreds of them, but I do remember having a few of them, and I remember tying bottle rockets to them and blowing them up,
Hmm.
and all that cool fun stuff that you look back now and you're like, man, I probably could have done pretty well with those selling them, but
No.
instead they're all in pieces around the property somewhere.
Yeah, for a lot
Star
of
Wars
stuff.
memorabilia, whether it be posters or
Okay.
shirts or any of that stuff. I remember my older brother was a big Kiss fan, which got
Hmm.
me to being a big Kiss fan. So there was a lot of the Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, Peter Criss, that type of stuff lurking around, posters, whatever.
Hmm.
Star Wars, Kiss. Trying to think of other things that would have been. I said He Man. My brother wasn't into He Man, but I was. Um, Trying to think of something that would have been outside the norm. We talked about VHSs, although it didn't get
Yeah.
recorded. VHS was a big thing that I was into. That's really it. Everything else might have been like the prize piece, like you got a bicycle, but you're not a bicycle collector,
Right.
obviously. Stuff like that. Skateboards, I loved everything that was related to skateboarding, whether it be, my brother had a Thrasher magazine subscription, and every time he would get the
Hmm.
magazines, he'd flip through them, and then I would acquire them and flip through them and kind of keep them safe. Comic
Yeah.
books. That's another thing I collected as a kid. I actually acquired some and then started collecting on my own over time. So that was also a family thing. The comic books were. They
Okay.
were my dad's. Yep.
Yeah, that was a big thing, and we never got into that. I guess I don't know. We get to have like an acquired taste for comics, like how they're written. I don't know what it is.
hmm I think it was really
How
the
some people are
artwork
just
that drew me
connected.
in.
I mean, the artwork's awesome on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
They, those horror comics were the ones that I don't know if they were
yeah.
my dad's or if someone else brought them to our place, but I remember
Hmm.
really being just super drawn to those because not
That's
only
like
were the
something.
covers amazing, but the
Yeah,
inside stuff was just like, yeah, really, really cool.
that's stuff now that I don't look at because I don't want to acquire too many of those.
Yeah.
Horror.
Yep.
Being the horror queen.
So what else did you get into collecting? What's
Well, I was
something else
thinking
on your
back.
list?
This is more of like an origin story start, but I know for Christmas or like our birthdays, we always got one of something that we collected throughout that period. And there's always changeover. We didn't always collect the same. I don't know how long, I guess. But my brother collected like Star Wars figures, so every Christmas you get a Star Wars figure. Or I think that's my dad started that maybe. I was thinking back now. I'm like, see, this is why I'm the way I am. Because for every like holiday,
Yeah.
we would get a new Star Wars figure, or he would get baseball cards. I would get basketball cards. Pogs. I collected Pogs. I know I got those for like Christmas,
Yep.
birthdays, Beanie Babies. I collected those back in the day.
Yeah.
What else did I put down?
I
Sports cards,
remember.
obviously, which I still collect.
Yep.
Crazy Bones, which is like a fad. They were around for a little while. And then my parents always bought me the Dreamsicles for Christmas. The little figurines, like
I don't
Precious
remember those.
Moments. Do you know those?
Mm-mm. Don't remember.
It's like a Hallmark thing that Hallmark
Yeah.
sold.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was trying
Probably
to think
makes
of some
sense now,
things that
though.
that my mom would have collected. I know that she was into a few various things, but it kind of all bleeds together with family related stuff, whether it be the record collection or the cars or the motorcycles
It was just
or all of
my
that stuff.
mom never. I don't think my mom ever collected anything.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, there's whether you want to
I don't
refer
know.
to it as an item of being collected or family
Mhm.
heirlooms like photos and things like that. You know, those.
Well, that's what brings me to my next question. Where do we draw the line at? Because like I have my things that I collect, but then I also have 5,000 T-shirts.
Oh
Like where does
gosh,
that
yeah.
fall under?
You know, I purge my shirts probably 3 times in my life, and I still look at my t-shirt
Me too.
selections, and I'm like, how has it gotten to this
But I
far?
won't get rid of them.
Well, that's the funny thing is thinking about when I did it, I was like, okay, this is way too many, but I've got to part with them. And then I'll look at it and it's like, man, haven't I done this already? I mean, I've literally been through so many, which really actually is a testament to how fortunate we are in our lives that we
Yeah,
are able to do
I
something
know.
like that. So, not to take that for granted. But
Yeah.
yeah, there is just the sheer amount of t-shirts that come and go, and especially when I first opened the record store, any band that we had play at the record store, I would buy a shirt from. So if we had 3 bands that would play and they
Hmm.
all had shirts, I would buy a shirt from
So is
each.
that collecting then, or is it what?
I mean, I tried not to buy anything I wouldn't wear,
I
but
had a hard time with
sometimes
this when I
it,
was thinking of this earlier.
yeah, yeah, sometimes I might buy something if they didn't have my size, and it's like, well, I'll try it,
Hmm.
it's close enough, and then maybe that might or might not
It's
work.
such a weird thing. I think once you have the gene or the bug, that's like it. You have
Yeah,
shoes, you have socks.
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know. Everybody has their weird niche.
I think the collecting without intending to use is a problem. So if you're asking where I draw the line,
Okay.
that might be a good place to just start. Whether that's the answer or not, I don't know. But if you're purchasing or acquiring something with no intention of using it,
Which is nothing
then
that I have.
yeah, that might be a place that you could draw the line, step back and go, okay, how could I better utilize my time and my finances? But if it
It's
brings you
hard.
happiness, who is the person to say whether it's right or wrong? So,
Well, that's what I was gonna go to is what are some pros and cons of collecting, which I got to. I had just two. For pros, I have like all the friends I've made and connections I have, and then cons, obviously being money for me,
yeah, yeah.
and
The,
then people that are being
finance,
competitive over everything.
yeah, finance is always the con when it comes to that
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, the friendships are really that's the real crown jewel of the whole
that's
thing
my number
because
one.
of course you already like it, so that emotional
Yeah.
connection is really what's getting you to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But second to that is the connections that you make with people because just what we do on a weekly basis is like, have
Mm-hmm.
you heard this record? Have you seen this
Right.
movie? Have you, we're connecting in this way over these things, and it's a lot of fun. It helps make the hobby fun when you're looking at we're going to use records for a second. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I know we're
Mm-hmm.
about to wrap it up. But when
Yeah.
you're looking at a record and somebody else is telling you you should not enjoy it that way, who are they to say? There's really no
Mm-hmm.
wrong way to enjoy the thing that makes you happy. So
Right.
enjoy it for whatever it is. Do with it what you will. If and I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and play devil's advocate. If purchasing something and putting it in a tub and putting it in your closet brings
I'll
you the
never
same
understand.
joy as someone who rips it out of the blister pack
Yeah.
and just starts fooling around with it on their table, so be it. Those two things are polar opposite in people's minds, but if the joy that it brings
No,
you is
like
the same, then go for it.
I think I'm somewhere in between the keeping things like pristine and having things torn apart. I'm like in between because I do like acquiring an item that has been used or loved or worn out,
Yeah,
that somebody loved and enjoyed before you and you have it now. It's awesome.
yeah.
But then there's like some stuff I don't want damaged too much, I guess we should say. I don't know. I'm somewhere in between that though, because I do like the vintage stuff.
Yeah. I will say I treat silk screened posters that are limited editions way different
Hmm.
than I treat the posters I used to have as kids because I
I
felt
wish I
like they
still
were
had
just
those.
assembly runs that you would just
Yeah.
print and you could get them everywhere. For crying out loud, I had each individual Kiss poster, and the
Hmm.
Peter Criss poster was actually printed from the negative backwards, where his tattoo was on the wrong side of the
Okay.
chest.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
not like it was
interesting.
a great thing. I had a huge Black Sabbath
That could be a
poster where
gold mine now.
it had Bill Ward and Geezer Butler's name on the wrong person when you read down the bottom, so they were reversed.
Hey, that could be worth something.
Now, it could be. I probably would
I
never
mean, I
sell it
don't know.
though. You know what I mean?
No,
It's
I
just
know.
Even if somebody was to say, hey, I'll pay your house off, I would be like, yeah, you can have it, of course. But
Oh yeah.
it would bring me more joy looking at it than it would to get rid of it. But yeah, those
Mhm.
silkscreen posters, I know they're limited edition. I know that the artists behind them intended on them being limited runs, and I
Right.
also know that somebody hand silkscreened that
And
thing,
that's
so it
pretty much
feels
a
a
lot of
little
my
different.
posters that I have hung up from Mondo,
Yeah,
places like that. They are numbered
yeah,
and they do have like artist signatures, so I kind of do want to keep them,
yeah,
protected.
absolutely. I could definitely go down a list of things that I collect, but we've got to stop somewhere. I was just trying to think of the origin stories for today, and if we revisit
Hmm.
this, then we'll definitely start getting into guitars and amplifiers and record players and
Oh
whatever
man.
else. Yeah, I mean it's literally endless, but you know, brings you happiness, right?
Yeah, that's all that matters in
I
this
try to
world.
think of everything has a purpose. You know what I mean? It's not just
Hmm.
like you're piling it on top of something else for a non-use.
Yeah.
So, like I said, draw the line. You got to use it somewhere. So I'm going to close this out by asking everyone who's watching a serious question. How many of the items you consider to be in your collection, if you were going to pare it down, would you be able to get rid of?
I'm already trying to work on that honestly, but it's curating is hard. I'm trying to
Yeah,
curate a lot of stuff right now.
yeah,
We could talk about that too in an episode. It is so
yeah.
hard.
I would totally love to revisit that whenever we maybe do this
Hmm.
again, because that's
Sounds
something that
good.
I really think we could go down the rabbit hole on for
Maybe we
sure.
could help each other.
Yeah. So like, subscribe, and comment. Be sure to tell your friends you're watching the Best Good Friends podcast, listening wherever you're listening. Thank you for hanging out with us this far. Anything you want to say closing out?
No, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed
Yep.
talking to you. It's a fun time.
Me too. So like, subscribe, comment. Be sure to comment and tell us how many of the collectibles you have that you could pare down. I'll talk to
Or
y'all
anything
next
about
week.
collecting.
Or anything about collecting. Yeah, don't forget to send us questions and we'll drop them over into that the rapid fire
Yes.
bucket.
Questions, please.